Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Show. Coming up, a dream day for the Dandy Dons spells the end for Michael Beale's time at Ibrox. Hearts get stitched at Hampden, and two of the best voices in Scottish football join us on the show. Derek Ray and Rory Hamilton will be with us later. Yes, it's another wonderfully wacky week in Scottish football, and after our Michael Beale-esque tactics last time out, we've decided to change our mind again. It's back to basics with a front three followed by a cheeky double substitution later on in the game. I'm your host, Andrew Slaven, and joining me is digital diva and queen of the screen. She is the senior producer at TNT Sports. Some call her the Isa of Scottish football. It's Laura Brannan.
Hello, how are you?
Hello, mate. And the Paisley punter living down under, Melbourne City's head of creative, Findlay Marks. How are you, pal?
Good, thanks. Yeah, not so bad. Touch of a cold, so apologies if my voice gets a bit croaky. But other than that, all good. Buzzing to talk about the football, obviously. Can't wait. Get us into it. Come on.
Someone's reeling after the weekend, I think, Laura. Someone needs some help.
Going to have a rant incoming.
Straight into the funnies, by the way, because we will go into it in deeper detail, but Rangers' defeat to Aberdeen was a sore one for Rangers fans, and it got a little bit sorer after the club decided to... They do it after every match, I think. They auctioned their match shirts that were all signed, and a lot of Rangers fans decided to kick off, which led to the club actually pulling them out. So there's no money going to charity now, which is a real shame. And I think this is where it's only in Scottish football... Well, let me rephrase that. Only Celtic and Rangers fans would cause this sort of uproar.
But it was going to raise money. So
I know.
Something is better than nothing. So ignore the noise and just raise the money.
Yeah, exactly.
Really strange decision.
These shirts are tainted, Findlay. Tainted with loss and grief and remorse.
If you did this after every disappointing Rangers result, like they'd never sell any shirts. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, it was a bit of a weird one, I've got to say. But and we'll get into the game properly in a little bit. But it was quite interesting to see the reaction on Twitter to a lot of stuff, a lot of anger. But I think also a lot of Rangers fans just going down the "if you don't laugh, you'll cry" kind of thing. My absolute favourite tweet that I saw, or favourite X, whatever you call it now, over the course of the weekend was a guy that tweeted, "My dad said to me when Aberdeen scored their third goal, do you want to go now or do you want to wait and boo?" And he said that was the only thing that made him laugh all day. My dad raised me to have some standards. I just thought that was quite nice. It's like the express reason that there would be anybody left at Ibrox at full time was just to boo. I thought that was quite nice. Commitment to the cause either way.
That was like the Hibs fans in Europe, wasn't it? I can't remember the team that they played now, but they lost to some absolute diddies. And they were all at the end going, fucking boo. We're good at that. We're good at that in this country.
The dogs bark and the caravan passes. The caravan keeps moving. The caravan keeps going.
So the news before kind of the weekend, really, the League Cup and the split of tickets was quite a hot topic, more so with Hearts fans, because Hearts fans are not, Laura, going to get a 50-50 split at Hampden against Rangers. It will happen between Hibs and Aberdeen the day before Hearts and Rangers. But Hearts aren't going to... I mean, why is this?
This is an absurd story. So instead of splitting a stadium 50-50 and then saying if you don't sell X amount of tickets, they're going to go to the opposition, they've decided to do it the opposite way around. So they've said you can have this segment, and if you sell it out by a certain date, we'll give you a little bit more. Which is just... I don't understand why they've done it this way around. So it's okay for Hibs and Aberdeen to get an equal split. But as soon as Celtic or Rangers are involved in the equation, suddenly it's a whole different story. What makes Rangers more important than any other of the three teams that are in the League Cup semi-finals?
Well, I mean, the answer to that really is the SPFL would look at that and say Rangers are a guaranteed ticket sale. Like, there will be Rangers fans that take that up. Because I've seen the articles where it said that on historical ticket sales with Hearts, they haven't taken all their allocation.
Yeah, but they should at least be given the opportunity to. And then if they don't sell them, absolutely, hand the Spears seats over. What gets me is the statement said it was the inability to segregate Hampden's North Stand. Okay, now I'm sorry, but this is not the first time we've tried to segregate the North Stand. There's literally been a split in the North Stand before at previous games, at Old Firm games as well. They segregate between the West and the North and the North and the East. Now, the way they segregate that is because there's a railing down there and it helps them divide it easier because it's not just literally stewards standing there. It's a little barrier as well. But see in the middle of the North Stand, there's exactly the same barrier. There is a fence breaking up the sand. You cannot walk from one end of the North Stand to the other end. So there's a natural segregation there. So there's absolute nonsense. That is not an excuse, and it's been segregated in the past. So that is just, if that was Hearts, I would be fighting that all day long because that is just a made up excuse.
Well, it looks like they did fight it because the club did come out and say, to assure fans, we requested and pushed for an even 50-50 split. But due to previous sales history, like I said, and the inability to segregate Hampden's Northland, so it's absolute bonkers and seems a bit more of a money grab from the SPFL, which on one hand you could understand, but it highlights the point of like, well, where's the SPFL finding, like, not treating one set of fans better than others? And that's just that inequality. It's not fair, Finn. Simple as that.
It's not. And I agree with you, Laura. I think regardless of what the pragmatic approach is, and that seems to be what it is, they're going by historical cases where Hearts, and to be honest, most non-Old Firm teams don't tend to sell out a 50% split of the stadium. You do on the rare occasion. So I think when Hearts and Hibs, for example, have met in the semis and it's a derby between the two sides, they do tend to sell out the full allocation, but not generally. Hearts specifically, by example, I think in their last 4 semi-finals against Old Firm opposition, I think it was 3 against Rangers and 1 against Celtic, they haven't sold out their allocation. But I agree with you, that notwithstanding, you should always go into it, I think, with a 50-50 split, because to me that's still at least valuing or showing that you're trying to value fans ahead of the practical element to it, which to them I'm sure is easier to, like you're saying, Andrew, sell the guaranteed tickets, the amount of tickets you know you're probably likely to sell, which is the way you would sell most other things, like, you know, if somebody's booking a gig venue or whatever, you try and do it to the size of audience you think you're going to have and all that kind of stuff. Whereas with football, you know the semi's going to be at Hampden either way, so you have to kind of cater to what you've got. But I agree with you. I think the starting point should always be 50-50, and if you don't sell out your allocation, at least you were given the option, nobody can complain, and if you don't sell it out, give it to the other team, see if they want it. So I think that's the fairest way to do it.
I suppose if the SPFL could sell the rights to the game a little bit better, this money grab or arguing who should get more seats or should it be 50-50 wouldn't be an issue, because they could just put a wee kind of tarp around some seats and separate fans. My point being, not a single Premiership game being televised over the weekend. Our top flight was not televised, guys. It seems to be this kind of growing disharmony between the fans of Scottish football clubs and the governing body that runs our game. How disappointed were you, Laura?
I think this is an absolute farce. You've got the only games that you can actually watch this weekend were Stirling Albion against Cove Rangers on Alba, which, to be fair, 2-each draw, not a bad game to be watching. And the other game was Motherwell Celtic on a pay-per-view channel. There was no option through anyone's subscriptions that they've got all season long to televise any game, regardless of the actual scoreline and stories that came out of it. Tell me in what circumstances how Rangers against Aberdeen isn't a game that you would want to televise anyway, at any stage of the season. I don't understand the mentality. Well, no, sorry, I do understand the mentality. The mentality is that Sky have the option to go to a stadium 4 times over the course of a season. And especially when it's Celtic and Rangers involved, they want to save those the home games for when the Old Firm games are on, and for the chance of a title clincher and the trophy presentation day. So it opens up absolutely no room for movement when any other team go to Ibrox or Celtic Park. So it's completely limited. You're never going to get any other game over the course of a season, and you've completely limited yourself, because how many times have we said it? The likes of Hearts going to Ibrox or Aberdeen going to Ibrox, you get a really good game out of it. But they're not interested. It would never have even been a conversation. And that's only just one game. There's a lot of games. Obviously, your Celtic, the Motherwell Celtic game is just a perfect example. How much would they have wanted to have that game, that advert for Scottish football on their channel? And they've just squandered it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those where just when the next round of rights come along, which is 2029, or we don't know where we'll be in 2029, that has to be a negotiation. That has to be on the table where they figure out something where it's just broader and just expands a bit more access into the games. I know that Celtic and Rangers can be a little bit prickly at times to deal with when it comes to these contract negotiations, but there just needs to be an expansion on the access to Scottish football grounds. But the SPFL are only there to protect what the clubs want. So this is where it's a bit of a disparity of who's really in charge.
To be fair, although the contract obviously does run till about 3 decades' time, the contract does slightly change next season where they can go to grounds 5 times over the course of the year, and they've also got a slight extension of number of games they can cover. Look, even before this, Sky can ask clubs if they can go again. So in exceptional circumstances, if they run out of games at Ibrox and they end up having to cover the league trophy presentation at the end of the season, they could go back to them and say, can we do this? Now, the Rangers are completely within the right to say, well, actually, no, we're going to cash in on pay-per-view on that one. But look, it's not a blanket no. They're not locked out. So it's just when you look at the whole course of it, a weekend, and you're thinking, well, okay, don't go to Ibrox then. Don't show Rangers against Aberdeen. Go and show Kilmarnock against Mirren. Why not? Well, we all know why not.
Why not? Yeah. Why not? Elsewhere, really cool story coming out of Italy. Bologna captain Lewis Ferguson having a great season. Captain Bologna to a 3-0 victory over Empoli at the weekend. I also got an assist, again, pressing the Steve Clark button to say, play me.
That's all he can do. He's just keep doing what he's doing. I think we'd said it before the last international break where I think it was just after he scored against Juventus. And again, he's had a brilliant start to the season there. You could do a lot worse than playing a goal-scoring midfielder from Serie, who's now captaining his side and is an integral part of that Bologna side. So yeah, it's just brilliant to see. It's so refreshing to live in a period where, having grown up, occasionally you would get Scots going abroad if they get a mental payday in Turkey, or Kevin Kyle goes to play in Cyprus for 6 months or something before he falls over. That kind of stuff. That was the level of it. But now we're actually seeing our players being desired as assets, as players to play for in these elite leagues. Lewis Ferguson, we see a whole bunch of younger players getting signed up as teenagers, effectively as kids, by the likes of Bayern Munich and clubs down in England. And I would love to see more talent coming through in the Scottish game that's allowed to arise to this level. And we've got a lot of good young players coming through. But I think with the state that kind of world football is in at the moment, you do want your national players to be playing at the highest possible level to realise the most amount of their potential. And sadly, that can't happen in Scotland. So if it can't happen in Scotland, where can it happen? Well, it's in the EPL, it's in the Bundesliga, it's in Serie A. And it's just amazing to see that our players are not just going there, but excelling. It's brilliant to see. And I'm so proud and pleased to see Lewis Ferguson go in there and do that. And I just hope he's one of hundreds that will be doing it in seasons to come.
Can he, by any chance, play at the left side of a back three? Because unfortunately it looks like Kieran Tierney is going to be out of the October international break now. He went off injured with a hamstring injury at the weekend for Real Sociedad. Obviously we don't know the extent of it yet, but when you hear the words Kieran Tierney and injury in the same sentence, it's never going to be a short thing and it's never going to be a good thing. So yeah, that's not a great one for the game against Spain coming up when we need a point against them to qualify. So yeah, get well soon, please. Please.
Yeah, please. That would be pretty good. If you are enjoying our dulcet tones, I'm certainly enjoying both of yours, guys. But if you do like our vocal veracity, you can catch us on all the podcast platforms. We're on YouTube. We're on Facebook. I always forget, Laura. We're TikTok as well. That's good.
Instagram as well.
Instagram. Yeah, I'm on that. That's good.
Thank you very much as well for taking over the TikTok channel and doing all that stuff for us, Laura, because it's just whenever it's Andrew and I, we're just like, we're also on You on TikTok? Do young people like you on TikTok?
Such an old man.
We're all about the TikToks.
I have no idea. I'm not a TikToker. Maybe I need to get on TikTok.
You have not lived. You need to
do you
get
know
on
what?
TikTok. What did you do during lockdown?
Our old friend JJ Bull has said it changed his life. It says it's the greatest platform of all time. We're not sponsored by TikTok, but if we were, these are the kind of messages you'd be receiving.
I cannot understand how in late 2023 you've still not given TikTok a try. It's mental.
Listen, I get sent links on TikTok, and what I actually really hate about it is when you're not on it, it says like, oh, you're on it, you get to watch something once, and then the second time it's like, to watch it again, you have to sign up to TikTok. So for goodness sake.
Not fine that, Andrew.
Stuff, all right. Jesus. This is like some sort of cult.
Of young people.
The only cult I'm interested in is this one. So join us each week. And if you want more content, subscribe now. So yeah, tell your friends, tell your ma, pa, auntie, uncle, your pal down the pub. That'd be class. Right, back to the football.
And that is the full-time whistle. The boos ring around Ibrox Stadium. 10-man Rangers 1, Aberdeen 3.
Let's kick off our SPFL roundup with the only place to go, really, Finn. Ibrox, a pretty disastrous performance from Rangers. An excellent one for Aberdeen, to be fair. A 3-1 victory for them as Robson's revolution continues. What do you take about this? Because the news came through on Sunday night that Rangers have parted ways with Michael Beale. You always had the sense that the time was never going to be given to Michael Beale. Unlike, one of his predecessors, Steven Gerrard. Stephen Davis comes in. Finn, what's your take on this whole kind of fiasco?
I don't know if it's necessarily fair to say that Beale's not had the time. I think the Rangers support have been pretty patient with them, and the board have been quite patient. As I've said a dozen times before, there's been no discernible signs of progress. In fact, I think Rangers have regressed, if that's possible, from the squad they had last season, despite spending, was it about £15 million on trying to refresh the squad. There doesn't seem to be any joined up thinking. I think the overall points are really looking on, this is almost a year that Beale's survived, well, less than a year, 9 months or something that he's been in charge. In that time, nothing's really changed. Every game that Rangers play, most of them, they seem to have about 1,000,000% possession, but they can't create any clear-cut chances. So the game against Aberdeen at the weekend is a good example because they probably should have been up about 3-1 at half-time with the chances they had. They still can't defend set pieces, which is where Aberdeen got a lot of joy and scored their opening goal. Almost every single goal, and this even goes back through the Gerrard time, there are multiple points of failure before every goal happens. So the brilliant summation of that is the third goal, where there's about 27 chances to clear it out the box and Rangers don't do it, and Aberdeen score a third goal. And I think an underlying cultural thing that's there, whether it's kind of from the top down, is for debate, but I think the vast majority of the Rangers squad and the players that have been there for a long time have now shown themselves beyond any reasonable doubt that they don't have the mental strength as a group to cope with the demands and expectations of the club and supporters. I don't think Rangers are particularly direct when they attack. This goes back to the possession thing. They take so long to try and create chances. And when you look at teams that are direct, Celtic are an obvious example. They're very direct. They score a lot of goals. Look at Yilmaz's goal against Livingston in the quarter-final of the League Cup. Basically just picks the ball up and runs and scores because it's direct. And Rangers don't do that often enough. But I think all of these things considered, it's 3 league defeats already inside 7 games. They're 7 points off the top of the table. They're trailing a Celtic side that I don't think it's unfair to say are not a particularly vintage Celtic side. And genuinely, if they didn't have Jack Butland in goal, I think they could be even further behind. So I said at the start of the season, I think this season is not necessarily how good Celtic will be in winning a league title. It's how much of a challenge Rangers can put up, and they haven't done that so far. So I think it looks like even by the 1st of October, the 2nd of October, Celtic will sleepwalk to another title because there's no opposition to them.
The key point for me over the weekend was the number of injuries that Rangers have with Cantwell, Raskin, Danilo, Roof as well. It meant that all of Beale's new signings kind of had to come to the fore. and they just haven't. Like, the signings have been totally dreadful. Contrast to Aberdeen at the weekend, where a lot of their new signings are starting to kind of pick up a little bit of momentum just in recent weeks. So that is one failure. But I remember speaking to, and I wonder what you think on this, Finn, because before Beale came in at Rangers, I remember speaking to someone at Ibrox when Van Bronckhorst was in charge. I remember just bringing up Beale. You know, he was always well known to kind of be a Rangers fan after he'd left Rangers with Steven Gerrard. And I almost posed the question, like, he's probably going to come back to Rangers, isn't he? And this person kind of said, like, yeah, probably. And I was like, what makes him so good? And he said to me that when Beale was at Rangers under Steven Gerrard, he did everything. And a lot of Rangers fans picked up on that, thinking, well, everyone thought Beale is the answer. Steven Gerrard is the figurehead, but Beale is the real tactician, the real guy who makes everything tick for Rangers. Now he's been given the job as manager, and it's just never worked out. What's different? Is it just he's a better number two?
I think it's genuinely that. I just think there's a difference between being a good coach and a good manager. And I think being the manager, being the figurehead, requires a certain type of person. And I just don't know if that was Michael Beale, or he certainly isn't yet. I think it was far too much too soon. Ali McCoist is another good example of that. I think even looking at previous Rangers managers, was a very successful coach under Walter Smith, not a football manager, despite, you know, when you listen to him on commentary, very, very knowledgeable about the game, knows it inside out, but it's a very specific, it's a bit Liam Neeson here, it's a very particular set of skills, you know, that you need to be a football manager, I think. And I don't know if Beale's got that. He felt like another project manager, a bit like Dyla or Kashinya or something like that. And I just think it's not what Rangers needed then, and it's definitely not what they need now going forward. They need somebody who has that pedigree and experience and can lead like a manager, not like a good coach.
Step forward, Stephen Davis.
What kind of struck me at the weekend as well was the way Beale was talking. It felt like a dead man walking after the game as well. Yeah, he'd kind of just conceded
felt like that for weeks.
Yeah, to be fair, it was a mix of when he was getting pressed on, like the usual question of about your future. He goes, "Well, we'll just have to wait and see." And it wasn't defending his place. There was this sort of kind of disrespectful line about, well, we shouldn't be losing to teams like Aberdeen. Now, yes, that's probably a mentality that Rangers should have, of course. But to use those words, considering Aberdeen were just behind them in the table last season, I think had a manager been in a better headspace, he would have worded that in a more sensible way. But it just kind of came across as, well, we didn't do well enough, we shouldn't be losing to teams like that. It's just like, it just seemed a wee bit disrespectful. So he got that impression his head was gone. So Stephen Davis now comes in, and sorry, go Finn.
I was just going to say, just on that point, I think his not that I'm going to try and defend Michael Beale from what he said a lot of the time, because I find it a bit odd. In that particular quote, I think it's been slightly taken out of context, because what he actually said is we shouldn't be losing at home by that scoreline to a team like Aberdeen, which I think is actually correct. I think, and this is purely just based on, given the financial advantage and the expectations that Rangers have above every other team in Scottish football apart from one, Rangers should be, I think, fairly expecting not to lose to any other team in Scotland by that scoreline. I think that's fair, but I agree with you. I think it was probably something that it was very much indicative of somebody who was just a kind of a dead man walking by that point. But yeah, sorry, Stephen Davis coming in. It's an interim thing. It's not going to be a long term.
Yeah, no, I can't see it either. I feel like this is sort of the time clubs kind of go round in circles in the sense of, right, we get in the newbie, we get in the old experienced one who's had connections with the club before, or we get in somebody completely new. And I kind of feel like this is the part of the circle we're at now, is Rangers just need somebody, almost like when Celtic got Ange Postecoglou, an experienced manager, but probably not really known around our kind of shores, and he comes in fresh.
They had him in Van Bronckhorst, and then they didn't give him any money. An experienced manager who'd won something, and an ex legend. But
that ticked the box of the emotional connection to the club.
True.
We've done that, we've seen that, and then we've almost kind of went back down the same route again with Beale as well, and also ticked the inexperienced box as well. Whereas I think this time it just needs to be complete shift, and it's like a safe pair of hands now. Let's not rock the boat in any way.
Well, the new I've just seen an article of Stephen Davis actually talking about becoming Rangers manager in 2020, saying it would be one of the greatest honours. So I do wonder. I mean, he's what, 38 now, 37. So like, you know, he came back to Rangers and they've probably been putting him through his coaching badges with the long-term plan, thinking that, well, this is a good place to learn and to see how things go at a big club. So you know what? Good luck to him. What is it? It's probably bad news for St Mirren. They're still unbeaten. They play them next week. Limassol first. It will be his first game in charge.
Yeah.
Who knows what the manager bounce will be. Just quickly, Laura, Motherwell, a really cruel game for them. They were excellent again against one of the top two. So given that they lost 1-0 to Rangers, I think they felt like they had a point to prove playing Celtic, and they were excellent. It went 1-0 to Celtic, then 1-1. Delirium amongst the Motherwell support, and then Celtic sucker punch. Once again, you actually text me saying, just wait. It's Celtic will score a 89th minute winner or something like that.
Yeah, that was at 0-0. I didn't even have time to text you after the equaliser to say, "Don't, it's coming." Yeah, this football's a cruel game, I think. I feel like the last kind of 3 games in a row now, Motherwell have played really well and not got anything against Rangers, St Mirren. They've had a hard run of games to be moved to the top 3 teams in the league. But the way in which this escalated is heartbreaking. You could see from the celebrations when Motherwell equalised, it looked like it was going to be the last kick of the ball. It was just, yeah. And I think when you see the level of celebrations from Celtic to be going that over the top over a win against Motherwell, that shows you just how difficult a game that they were given.
Even Brendan Rodgers admitted.
Mm-hmm. It felt like an achievement for them. It didn't just feel like they deserved it and they stole it at the end and it was justice done. I don't think that wasn't the mentality at all. It was like that was an achievement for them. A wee bit disappointed to see the Celtic fans invade the players. That was kind of my...
Well, the Motherwell fans did that as well, pretty much. Okay, they didn't invade players, but...
To be fair, there was fans of the pitch at both goals. I can't remember if the first goal or not, but certainly the second and third one, there was definitely fans on. I think it's fine if you kind of overspill slightly from the barrier. I can kind of forgive that, but I think that when you start running towards players, I'm not a fan of that. And I think what happened was when Celtic scored the winner, all the stewards and police went to that corner, which is between the Motherwell fans and the Celtic fans, to stop that kind of clash and invasion of fans. There was nobody, no steward, no police over at the other side of the net where the players were, and I didn't really like that aspect of it. As I say, I can excuse the overspilling slightly for emotions in a tight ground like that, but let's just stay away from the players. It's all right,
Laura, you can excuse the Motherwell fans, but you won't excuse the Celtic fans.
Just stay away from the players. I think when you see like Celtic players in the face of Liam Kelly, I think I don't like seeing that sort of thing. Like,
sure.
Enjoy it amongst yourselves, but don't involve the players in it.
Another great advert of Scottish football. Wasn't televised, although sorry, it was on PPV, wasn't it? But what about Hearts? A pretty important win. I wouldn't say a good win, but a pretty important win for them, Finn. But does it really take the pressure off of Stephen Naismith, because it wasn't a great game?
No, it wasn't a great game, but I do think it does. It's interesting looking at comparing it to the Michael Beale thing or whatever, where the pressure's just been mounting. There's been a lot of pressure on Naismith in recent weeks, but what a difference a week can make, because I think the result that they got against Killie in the League Cup with that last minute winner, what a week, by the way, not just for Naismith, but Alex Lowry as well, who came off the bench, I think 89 minutes, scores the winner in the 91st minute to put Hearts into the semi-final, and then he set up the only goal of the game for Forest, a header by Forest as well. I was like, they can't lose for
5'6".
That kind of madness is going on, yeah. But it was put on a plate by Lowry, beautiful delivery in. But I think, it's when you're not playing well, sometimes you just need to grind out the results and try and give yourselves that platform to do it. And Hearts have definitely done that this week. So it's not the easiest play to go up to Ross County to play. A really good result for them to win up there, and hopefully their season will kick on from here now.
Can't be having that, mate. You better get your finger out alright and make sure that you get the results.
Right, well, there's nothing worse when you go out to watch a game of football with your mates, especially in a pub or wherever, and the place doesn't put the commentary on. Or even worse, you have to listen to someone else's commentary on another match. It's an absolute honker. But whether it's radio or telly, commentators are our eyes, ears and emotions in live sport. But how has the role changed over the years? How difficult is it to get into the industry and do that role? And what makes a good commentator? Who better to tell us than two absolute class arts of the game in the commentary booth? We've got Derek Ray and we've got Rory Hamilton. How are you both?
Very good, thank you. Thank you for having us on. And very nice of you to say that. Usually when I go into a pub, they're delighted when I shut up.
Well, there's my first question, Rory. Do you go in and commentate in the game in your head? Or out loud?
Absolutely not. No, that's down.
Just to kick things off, it'd be good to get an idea, a brief background, shall we say, your careers so far. So, Rory, can you just start off by telling us, where did you start out? How did you get into media, and how did that lead to getting into the commentary booth?
Yeah, so when I was at university, I used to come through from Edinburgh to Glasgow on a Sunday afternoon, I think it was, to STV when they had their Scott Sport programme with Graham Spears playing the piano and all that sort of thing. And I just used to, I mean, it was very, very basic. I used to put up their interviews on the website. It was, learn a system for putting a file on a website, and that was basically it. But that was kind of my way into the industry. Eventually got a job with them as a very junior assistant producer, and then stayed in the sort of production side of things from STV. Jim Delahunt kind of took me down to Setanta, which was just down the stairs, that sort of got me awarded into the live side of broadcasting, which I really enjoyed, that live element. And then because there was a lot more going on a Saturday with 6 commentators out at games, that's probably the first moment that you start to realise that commentary is actually a job, and it's potentially somewhere down the line attainable because you're in the right place. But it really took until Setanta went by the wayside for me to go freelance, and worked with mainly Sky Sports, but did a lot of other projects as well, and that was where I got my first sort of route into commentary. But it was very much as sort of Ian Crocker's sidekick. So when there was a double header in the Scottish Cup, then they'd wheel me out a few times a season. But Derek going to the States was probably actually, that was how I got my break into being a full-time commentator. I felt that I could actually justify saying that was my job.
That's true, because I remember Derek actually bumped into you at BT Sport when you had announced you were leaving to go. I know you share your time between the US, but you do so much more now in the Bundesliga because you're so passionate. Because you studied in Germany as well, didn't you? But
I did.
How did your career start then, and how different do you think that was from Rory's?
Well, just following on from what Rory said, I was personally delighted when I heard that Rory was going to be my successor at BT Sport, because obviously I had no say in that. I simply decided that I was going to be leaving in 2017, and I'd hoped that Rory was the person they were going to approach, and that's how it turned out. So it's always nice when things like that do come to pass. But my story goes back a bit further. Obviously, I'm a bit older. So we're going back to the 1970s, when I used to simply make tapes to myself of commentaries. And it was a passion I had as a young boy. And the tapes I would just keep. I've actually got a few of them back in Aberdeen. My father's kept a few of them. And from that point on, I sort of then gravitated towards going to the local park and commentating in my little sort of mini tape recorder. And then to Pittodrie, because I'm from Aberdeen, so that was the local team. I would do that for reserve team games, and then plucked up the courage to do it for first team games when I was about 12 or 13. And I would sit near the front of the south stand, the same stand where the TV cameras are nowadays. And I'd get very strange looks. I became known as that silly little loon that sits and talks to himself for 2 hours, and didn't know at the time what I was actually doing was building a body of work. And I then took that body of work to hospital radio, and they gave me a chance when I was a teenager. And that was the era of Fergie and, Willie Miller and Alec McLeish and Gordon Strachan, and Aberdeen winning a European trophy. So again, I was very lucky to be involved, albeit as an amateur at that time. and just kept doing it with hospital radio. And then when I went to university, also in Aberdeen, to study German, I decided that I was going to send my tapes to BBC Radio Scotland. Now, I should also say that earlier on, when I was about 12 or 13, I'd sent my tapes to the commentator who was my hero, David Francie.
Here at Dens Park, there's still no scoring, so Hearts at the moment have this vital point that can win them the title. And how the crowd know it, but it's a corner to Dundee over on that far side. A high and curling ball is let it down by Brown, it's in the net, and a goal! A goal led by Albert Kidd. The corner headed down there by Brown. Across it came to Kidd, and he just whipped it into the Hearts net. The unthinkable has happened. With 7 minutes of this game left for play, it's Dundee 1, Heart of Midlothian 0.
Who was, to me, just Scottish football. You know, his voice represented Scottish football. And I wrote to him thinking I'll never hear back. But 3 weeks later, I got this beautiful handwritten letter, which I still have. And it sort of just made my year to hear from my broadcasting hero. And he was very nice, very complimentary, gave me some tips, which I still use to this day, about how to use your voice and how to be prepared for a commentary and things like that. And thought nothing of it. But what has happened was when I sent my tape to the BBC, it ended up with David again. And David then gave it to the producer. And the producer said, quite like this, and invited me down to Glasgow. We had a chat. He said, I'd like to get you on the air sometime. Got me on the air for a reporter's gig at Pataudry. You know, in those days, we didn't do live commentary on every single game. It was updates. So I did the updates. You know, got that under my belt, thought they went fine. And then a couple of weeks after that, they suddenly needed a commentator on a game at Kilmarnock Dumbarton, then in the second tier, the old first division. And I went down and did that. It was because literally all the other commentators, including David Francie, were unavailable either through illness. In his case, it was actually a knee injury. Jerry McNee was unavailable, Rory Forsyth was unavailable, so they got down the list to me. And they thought, okay, we'll give this young guy his chance. I was 19 at the time. So I did the game, and when you're 19, I think it's the same being a footballer or in most walks of life. You're not actually as nervous as you are at, 39, 49. I can say that from experience now. So I did the game, went back home. There was a message, called the BBC, called Charles Runcie, the senior producer. So I called Charles. He said, well done today. He said, would you like to do a second assignment for us? I said, I would love that. I said, when might that be? He said, well, how about this midweek? We'd like to send you to Wembley to do England against Scotland. And that was my second game on the air. And again, you can't expect that as a young broadcaster. You don't really expect that even as a seasoned broadcaster. So my second game on the air was England-Scotland with John Gregg as my co-commentator. And from that point on, I was with the BBC for several years. Learned, TV during that time as well. I was a radio commentator, and proudly a radio commentator. Didn't really want to do TV at that time, but got into TV. And again, it's just about getting that lucky break. You have to be a bit lucky, and I was certainly very fortunate at a young age.
I love how just listening to that is fascinating. Derek actually had a plan. I required a company going bust, and then actually the way that I got my very first commentary was it was a rugby game, and we were sitting in a meeting. It was after Setanta had gone, and STV did a rugby program, and we were sitting after the first week, patting ourselves on the back, and Colin Davidson, who Derek will know well, was the exec producer on that program, and he turned and he said, look, everyone's done really well on the program, but our only criticism is that we've got a league that involves Welsh and Irish and Scottish teams, and we've got Welsh commentators and Irish commentators, but no Scottish voice. So I sort of joked, oh, well, I could do it. And
brilliant.
Everyone sort of laughed, and there was nothing taken seriously. I wasn't meaning it seriously. I was commuting from my parents' house up in Speyside, so it was like a 3.5 hour drive every week to come down to sleep on people's floors because, gave up my flat in Glasgow and all that kind of thing, and was driving down to a game at Murrayfield that was Edinburgh against Connacht, and Colin phoned me and said, you made that joke in the meeting, and I was like, yeah. Well, you're doing the game tonight. So I was
tonight? It was
right.
on the night?
Okay, so I was like, total change of mentality, and because now I'll very much like Derek, I'm a bit of a stats guy, and I'll do my prep to the nth degree, no matter what game it is, who it's for. It's part of the preparation that you just want to get your head in the game by spending a couple of days looking over all the information on it. And that was very much thrown in at the deep end kind of gig. So that's how my first game came. Not quite Scotland, England.
I'm always fascinated to see the amount of work that has to go into preparation for a game, regardless of the level, if it's a World Cup final or, you know, if it's a Scottish Cup first round game or whatever it is. And I know that there's a huge amount of prep, but one thing I really wanted to ask is, how much do you let your commentary kind of flow in the moment, and how much of the things that you say are kind of pre-planned? Because I know that, you know, there's a lull in the game, you'll probably slip into something, a fact here or something you've pre-planned. But if you know a big moment could happen, or if it might happen, do you kind of try and pre-plan that in advance? Or do you just try and soak up the emotion and the atmosphere of the game and let that come out?
I think the emotion and the atmosphere are the most important things. I always say to people, yeah, we do all this preparation. Rory's right. We spend days doing this preparation, but we do it in the knowledge that if we're lucky, we might use 2 or 3% of what we've actually prepared that day, you know, but you have to do the 100% without knowing, you know, which part of the preparation you're actually going to make use of on air. But the passion and the emotion are more important than that. What you want to be in a position to do is not miss something that's really important, you know. So, you know, what's not important is if somebody has scored the 10th goal of their career. But if somebody is about to score the 100th goal of their career for a club, you need to know that, and you need to be ready for that. So you're not scripting that as such, but you need to have in your head, oh yeah, if he scores, then that is something I have to mention. But the passion and the emotion, that's more important, because fans in the stadium or on TV, they're not thinking about the numbers so much. They're, you know, supporting their team or not liking another team maybe, or whatever. They have different motivations for watching a game. So it is that combination. But I always think that everything is best when it's organic. If you try to over-plan what you're going to say in the heat of the moment, it's going to sound over-planned. But at the same time, there's that sort of happy medium between being prepared but not being scripted, you know, and I think that's what you always strive for, because you're living in the moment. And you could, you know, and I know people who prepare a lot of lines during games, and they'll do it as a fail-safe. You know, I've got a very good friend who's in commentary who says, I always prepare a line because, you know, I just want to have it there in my head in case it does happen. But then when it does happen, you just don't use it. Or he would say, I probably never use it, or 1% of the time would use it. So we're all a little bit different in that sense. But yeah, I mean, the live commentary should always be live commentary, and it should be what you're feeling at that time. And a lot of it comes from experience, from having done it for a long time, knowing how you react. The funny thing is that for all that you know, fans think commentators, you know, should lose it and should shout and scream, I always say we actually shouldn't shout and scream. As a commentator, if we were to shout and scream as though we were in a pub, it wouldn't sound very good on the air. So there's a certain skill to knowing how to use your voice in a big moment. You're projecting more than you are shouting and screaming. And, you know, sometimes we're happier with the end result than we are at other times. You know, I'm sure Rory will agree with me. Sometimes you've commentated on a big moment and you thought that went well, and you hear it back and you sort of go, I could have done that a bit better. Or conversely, sometimes you think, I didn't quite do that justice, and then you listen back and you think, oh, actually, that was fine. So you never quite know. I don't know what you think about that, Rory.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, what you're not going to get too much of on this podcast is a big contrast of mine and Derek's approaches, because I was fortunate enough to learn from Derek, and Ian Crocker were really good mentors for me coming up. Whenever I had a piece of advice to ask, a conversation to have, then they were always there for me. So a lot of my style of commentary comes from them. So unsurprisingly, I completely agree with Derek. I'm not one that will script these big live moments. I think there are elements that I will script, things like teams emerging onto the pitch, I like to get that right. I won't script it probably until half an hour, 20 minutes before kickoff, because I want to get myself into the moment, to feel what the stadium's like, the walk up to the ground, even the city the days before. So those bits I'll script, but live things not. I'll come back to it as well though. What I do quite like to do, I'm a big outdoors guy. I love being in the mountains, and one of the things that I do, any big game, I like to get myself into the hills and just by myself or with the dog. And it's not to script things, but all I'll do is think about that big game that's coming up, and it's to prepare yourself for what might happen. And I play through endless eventualities in that game. None of them will happen, I know that, but it just prepares your mind for, what if John McGinn scores in the 96th minute to qualify Scotland for the Euros? Things like that. You've already worked through that in your mind and how you might feel. So rather than just being in total shock, and obviously a moment like that, you would be so emotional anyway, and you might just lose the plot being so excited, that I think that's an opportunity to just set yourself up for those big moments, prepare yourself mentally. Over my career, there have been a few that throughout games, little phrases have maybe come to me, and I might have jotted a couple of words down on the side of my paper, thinking, well, I'll never use them, but because it's maybe come to you at some point during the game, you're like, I don't actually want to lose that. So one of them, which is one that I often get asked about by Celtic fans, was their victory over Lazio, which ironically is the game that I'm doing on Wednesday. So I'm looking forward to that, but I can't use the same line again. So it was the one about the Glaswegian Coliseum.
Christopher Julian, the 6'5" hero!
About, I don't know, 15 minutes before the end, I scribbled Coliseum and Glasgow down on the side of my notes, because I was like, this place is a real Coliseum of Glaswegian football. But it wasn't until the goal actually went in that there was a trigger in your mind that Glaswegian Coliseum rolls off the tongue a little bit better than Glasgow Coliseum. But you can only do that sort of thing if it's a last kick of the ball kind of game. Those are the ones that you have to commit on, because the result is pretty certain. So they're not things I don't think that you can just fully prepare for and write line after line in the hope that it happens. You very occasionally, maybe a handful of times, Derek will know much better, handful of times in your career that you maybe get that little poetic gem that just works a treat.
Yeah.
I was going. That is what I was going to ask, was how much you've played it out in your mind, because you're going to have that, hopefully, that killer line of when we do actually clinch qualification, which is going to be historic. And that's what I was going to ask you. You kind of answered that, but what I also want to know is, Derek, you'd mentioned having that resilience to kind of hold yourself, not get caught up in emotion. But how much do you enjoy if your co-commentator gets carried away? And I'm thinking, obviously, the most recent one being the Norway game with Mikey Stewart screaming over you, Rory. I personally, I like that, because it almost feels like there's a kind of fan element to it. But I understand that can only really happen in certain games, like Scotland, for example. How much do you enjoy that sort of emotion coming right around you?
Yeah, I thought that was a great moment from Michael, because it grasped the feeling of everyone watching it. And you're right, there probably are only a few games where you can do that, and it's on games for the national team, because pretty much your entire audience is wanting the same outcome. But also, that was a game where you couldn't really, for 89 minutes, you couldn't see that happening. It was just one of those games that threw something at you that you couldn't really predict or envisage beforehand. And I mean, I said to, so I've just got it over here, we've just moved house, and one of the guys off Twitter, Fitma Tweets, did a drawing for that, and he sent it to me. And I said to him, maybe there's nothing textbook about my commentary from that. It's not one that I would necessarily give advice on or put on my show reel, but it's one that I absolutely love. Not because of the words that I say, but it's just because it's pure emotion. And sometimes you just have to let yourself go. and that was one of those.
Yeah, if I could maybe chat about that subject generally, it's a good subject, Laura, because I can tell you this, as a breed, most commentators actually hate it when the co-commentator comes in and shouts loudly, because if you think about it, it's almost like, I think, and again, this sounds very precious, but it's like, it's like somebody is sort of trampling on the painting that you just spent 2 hours trying to put together. Again, we understand why it happens, but I think it should only happen in a very specific situation like that. If it's happening in every game, then I think a producer would normally say to the co-commentator, no, just wait, because you'll get your moment. And that's the thing, is that the co-commentator has his or her moment come the replays to analyse, and that is their primary function. So the commentator ideally would come up with a line that matches the pictures. And I think that's the important thing. And I do think sometimes we get away from that a little bit in modern TV. We've sort of forgotten a bit that it's a visual medium. And as commentators, if we're at our best, this is just my opinion, but if we're at our best, our words should never overpower the pictures. Radio is different, because radio is the theatre of the mind. And in radio, you are creating the pictures for the person listening. But people on TV can see it. So the words should be subtle enough that they enhance the picture. It's quite difficult to get that right a lot of the time. And you are going on pure emotion. But that's, when I said earlier, you have to be a little bit disciplined. You have to sometimes hold yourself back and not just make it sort of, verbiage and words for the sake of words. Should be words that are subtly enriching the picture and striking that balance. Difficult.
Is it quite an enjoyable thing to have the opportunity to watch back brilliant moments, whether it's with Scotland or like, Rory, you've covered a lot of iconic nights in the recent history of Rangers and Celtic in European matches. To know that you're kind of like, you're part of people's memories from those moments, and even something that kind of transcends that a little from your side, Derek, because obviously a whole generation that might not have heard you commentate live on games will know your voice very distinctly from being the voice of the FIFA and EA FC games now going forward. Is that quite a nice thing, that you are part of people's memories of certain moments and occasions and matches, or even for people that are maybe not even massive football fans, but get into the sport through playing games like FIFA or whatever, you're the person that they will associate that memory with?
Oh, undoubtedly. It's a lovely thing. I mean, it really is. It's a beautiful thing when somebody, and in social media, people have access to you now that maybe they didn't, in a way that they didn't several years ago. But it's a really touching thing if somebody says, and I heard somebody recently who said, for the last few years, you've been the voice of my upbringing.
A look at Neymar, a true entertainer, whether for club or country. Lee Dixon, what do you expect to see from him?
Well, I'm so pleased I've retired. I know that. I wouldn't like to mark Neymar. He goes left, he goes right, he turns you in circles. Absolute genius.
I'll tell you what, he's wishing you hadn't retired.
There's no need for that.
You've been the voice of my playing this video game that is iconic around the world, in my case. And, you're right. There are a lot of people who only know a commentator through the video game, and it's a different audience. It's a much younger audience. And the same for a big match. And if you've done a big match justice, hopefully you have, and you sort of become a little bit synonymous with that match because people remember watching it. One of the proudest things I have from my second spell working in Scotland between 2009 and 2017 was, Hearts fans still come to me and talk about the commentary we had on Hearts Hibs when Hearts were already going down, but everybody knew they were going down, but it looked as though they were going to go down in a derby against Hibs at Tynecastle. It turned out that Hibs also got relegated that same season, but Hibs fans were sort of gloating a little bit, and they were going to send Hearts down, and Hearts turned the tables on them, and that's when I'm very proud of. We're talking earlier, Rory was talking about lines that just come to you in a game. For some reason, Gary McAllister, my co-com, and I have been talking about Hearts being defiant and simply not letting it happen at their place. And again, I don't know where it came from. I had not planned it, but got a great shot of Gary Locke, the Hearts manager, when they made it 2-0 through Billy King right at the end of the game. Gary Locke going absolutely mental and shouting loudly. And I think I said, not on this patch of Edinburgh land, not in a derby, no relegation today.
Nicholson with the pass, it might fall for Billy King, he could finish it! Billy King! 2-0 to Hearts! And the message is clear, not on this patch of Edinburgh land, not in a derby, no relegation today!
And I since then, every year when that clip comes out, because nowadays people send clips out when it was 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I get a whole host of lovely responses from Hearts fans who say that is to me part of the whole experience of that day, which is very special for Hearts fans because they avoided relegation on a day when they really wanted to avoid relegation. Hibs didn't send them down. So if you can do that, and as I say, if you can just do it justice, I think that's all you strive for. But of course, it's nice when people are nice to you, because let's face it, as commentators, we're very much in the firing line, and people aren't always nice to us.
I actually had a really similar one in Rangers' recent run into the Europa League final when they won in Dortmund. And at half-time, Daryl Curry's sign-off into the break was Rangers are in dreamland in Germany. I was like, well, that's a good line, but I obviously can't use that again. But I was like, but I can do better. So the next goal was Dreamland in Deutschland.
Dortmund. Sland!
So I actually stole the line from Daryl.
Well done.
I was going to bring that one up purely just because I'm a Rangers fan and I live out in Melbourne. We moved out to Melbourne April 2022, so it was like right in the midst of the run to the Europa League final. So I was having to get used to getting up at like 3 a.m. to watch the games. And what was always brilliant was your commentary, kind of, Ibrox is bouncing or Dreamland in Deutschland or whatever, all these brilliant iconic moments that with every game I'm kind of sitting there in the dark with my headphones on the couch, kind of just at 4 a.m. being like, I feel I'm so far away from all of this happening, but I feel like it's happening right in front of me, because you totally captured like that emotion in the sense of, having been at Ibrox in the European night. I know what it feels like, and it felt like that coming through on the TV, which was a wonderful thing. So yeah, I was very pleased that you were kind of that you were delivering lines like that through all these iconic moments happening.
I think that's why I always try. Obviously, you get budget restrictions for a lot of things, and Derek will be well aware of this throughout his career. I always want to be at the ground, no matter what it is. I would pay my way to, don't tell them, to get there. But I always want to be at the ground. It's never quite the same when not. So I think, just trying to... I remember those games when, Ibrox really was absolutely bouncing. The Leipzig game is like something I've never seen before anywhere. The emotion that night was quite incredible. It's one of those ones that when you get home, it takes you hours to get to sleep because your mind's just trying to process everything that you've just taken in for 2-3 hours of your life, and you can't really work it out. But it's the nicest thing when people come to you and say, and I get a fair amount from Rangers fans for that run. The first time I got it was from Celtic's win in Rome against Lazio, and a lot of Celtic fans that night who had been at the game messaged me and said, oh, we've just been playing your commentary all night since we got in, because they didn't hear it live, so they wanted to hear it. So that was really nice. So, I've not done it for as many years, but those big European nights are really when I think that you can kind of come into your own. But when Derek was talking about doing his computer commentary, I'm almost a little bit starstruck here, because I had a layover in Paris airport coming back from Nice on Monday. I was over for the rugby, and they've got all the PS5s set up. So I spent 8 hours listening to Derek.
Oh,
no way.
That's it for my flight.
I pity Rory's ears on the basis of that.
8 hours? Oh my goodness.
Yeah. 8 hours after a lot less than that sleep after the Scotland-Tonga game, I must add.
Amazing. I still like the mental picture that I have of Finn 3 a.m. watching Rangers run to the European Cup final, trying not to scream in celebration, otherwise the neighbours will phone the police thinking something's happened. How do you get away with that?
Big men are up from the back. El Mahoney, right foot, whips it. Oh, jeezy peeps, man.
Elsewhere in Scottish football, don't have much time, do we, guys? So I'll just quickly point out the fact that Duncan Ferguson got off to a spectacular start at Inverness Caledonian Thistle against Arbroath. Squeaky bum time a little bit, though. I think they were 3-0 up and it finished 3-2. But, you know, one of those. We'll see what happens. But it's a good start for Inverness and Duncan Ferguson. So good luck to him. I'm saying good luck because I don't want him to batter me. But there you go. That's it. Another podcast is done. Another week in the bag. Thanks to Derek and Rory for giving us their time to talk to us. It's really, really good to hear their industry insights. But it's about time to say, go and listen to something else now. Isn't that right, Laura?
It is indeed. And we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Bye.